The air cracked with tension as a fist swung toward Jamal's face, his small frame stumbling backward in the dusty alley behind Lincoln High. The three boys circling him laughed, their voices sharp and cruel, echoing off the brick walls. "What's wrong, kid? Gonna cry for your big sister?" One sneered, shoving Jamal hard enough to make him trip over a pile of discarded cans. At just 11 years old, Jamal's wide eyes glistened with fear, but he clenched his fists, refusing to let the tears fall. Watching from the shadows, Aisha's heart thundered in her chest. Her little brother, her everything, was cornered, and the fire in her gut told her this wasn't just another schoolyard scuffle. These weren't just bullies, they were predators, and they'd picked the wrong prey. Aisha Johnson, 17, was no stranger to protecting Jamal. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in Chicago, she'd been his shield since their parents worked double shifts to keep the lights on. Their mom, a nurse, and dad, a bus driver, were rarely home before dark, leaving Aisha to walk Jamal to and from school, to make sure he ate, and to keep him safe from the world that seemed to chew up kids like him. Jamal was small for his age, quiet, with a love for sketching superheroes in his worn-out notebook. He was an easy target, and Aisha knew it. What the world didn't know, what these boys didn't know, was that Aisha was a force of nature, a martial arts prodigy who'd been training in Taekwondo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since she was 8. Her dojo was her sanctuary, her fists and feet her poetry, and she'd earned her black belt through sweat, bruises, and a will that refused to break. But Aisha wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Today, she was fighting for Jamal. The alley reeked of stale beer and garbage, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows as Aisha stepped forward, her sneakers silent against the pavement. She wore a faded hoodie and jeans, her braided hair pulled back tight, but her presence was electric, like a storm about to break. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice low but steady, cutting through the boys' laughter like a blade. The leader, a lanky kid named Trey with a scar above his eyebrow, turned and smirked. "Oh, look, it's the big sister to the rescue. What you gonna do, huh?" His friends snickered, one cracking his knuckles for effect. Jamal scrambled to his feet, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Aisha, don't. There are too many." Aisha's eyes locked onto Jamal's, and in that moment, she saw more than fear. She saw shame, the kind that burrowed deep when you felt like you couldn't stand up for yourself. It broke her heart, but it also steeled her resolve. She'd spent years learning to control her anger, to channel it into precision and power, but right now, it was hard to keep the rage at bay. These boys weren't just picking on Jamal, they were trying to strip him of his dignity, and Aisha wasn't about to let that happen. "Last chance," she said, stepping closer, her hands loose at her sides but ready. Trey laughed, tossing a pebble at Jamal, who flinched. "Man, she's acting all tough. You think you scare us?" He took a step toward Aisha, puffing out his chest, his two friends closing in behind him. They were bigger than her, older, maybe 16 or 17, with the kind of arrogance that came from knowing they'd never been challenged. Aisha's heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of what was about to happen. She didn't want to fight, not because she couldn't, but because she knew what it would mean. A fight here, in this alley, could change everything. Suspension, police, rumors spreading through school. But then she looked at Jamal, his lip quivering, his sketchbook clutched to his chest, and she knew there was no walking away. The first punch came fast, Trey's fist aiming for Aisha's face. She moved like water, sidestepping with a grace that belied her strength, her arms snapping up to block. Before Trey could react, she drove her palm into his chest, sending him staggering back. The other two froze, their bravado faltering as Trey coughed, clutching his ribs. "What the?" one muttered, but Aisha didn't give them time to process. She dropped into a stance, her body low, her eyes scanning all three. "Walk away," she said, her voice calm but laced with steel. "You don't want this." They didn't listen. The second boy, stocky with a buzz cut, lunged, swinging wildly. Aisha caught his arm, twisted, and used his momentum to flip him onto the ground, his back hitting the pavement with a thud. The third boy hesitated, then charged, but Aisha was ready. A swift kick to his knee dropped him to a crouch, and a controlled push sent him sprawling. Trey, recovered now, roared and came at her again, but Aisha was done playing. She ducked under his swing, grabbed his wrist, and executed a perfect jiu-jitsu takedown, pinning him face down with her knee in his back. "Stay down," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. The alley was silent except for Trey's labored breathing and the faint whimper of the boy with the buzz cut. Jamal stood frozen, his eyes wide, his sketchbook trembling in his hands. Aisha stood up, releasing Trey but keeping her eyes on him. "Get up and go," she said. "And if you ever touch my brother again, you won't walk away next time." The boys scrambled to their feet, muttering curses under their breath, but too shaken to argue. They stumbled out of the alley, leaving behind the echo of their defeat. Aisha turned to Jamal, her expression softening. "You okay?" she asked, kneeling to check him for bruises. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, his small body still shaking. "I'm sorry, Aisha," he whispered. "I should have fought back." Her heart clenched. She pulled him into a hug, her arms strong and steady. "You don't have to fight, Jamal. That's why I'm here. But you're stronger than you think, okay? You don't need to prove it to anyone." That night, back in their cramped apartment, Aisha sat with Jamal on the couch, helping him sketch a new superhero, a girl with braids who could take down giants with a single kick. But the victory in the alley didn't feel like a win. Word spread fast, and by Monday, the school was buzzing. Some kids called Aisha a hero, others whispered she was trouble, a thug who'd attacked 3 boys for no reason. The principal called her in, warning her about suspensions, about how fights looked bad on college applications. Aisha sat quietly, her jaw tight, knowing she'd done what she had to but feeling the weight of judgment all the same. The bigger challenge came later. Jamal started withdrawing, skipping school to avoid the stares, the whispers, the kids who now teased him for needing his sister to save him. Aisha saw the light dimming in his eyes, and it terrified her. She'd protected his body, but his spirit was slipping. She tried talking to him, but he'd just shrug and say, "I'm fine." At the dojo, her sensei, Master Kim, noticed her distraction during sparring. "You're carrying too much, Aisha," he said one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "You can't fight everyone's battles. Teach him to stand tall, not just behind you." Aisha took the advice to heart. She started bringing Jamal to the dojo, not to fight, but to learn discipline, to move, to feel the strength in his own body. At first, he was reluctant, embarrassed by his small size and clumsy steps. But Aisha was patient, showing him basic stances, teaching him to breathe through fear. Slowly, Jamal began to change. He stood a little straighter, laughed a little louder. One day, he landed a perfect front kick, and the grin on his face lit up the room. Aisha felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from pride. The bullies didn't come back, but the world didn't stop testing them. Aisha faced her own battles, scholarship applications, balancing school and training, and the constant pressure to prove she was more than a girl from the hood. Jamal struggled with confidence, with believing he could be more than a target. But together, they found a rhythm. Aisha taught Jamal to defend himself, not just with fists but with words, with art, with the quiet courage of knowing who he was. Jamal, in turn, reminded Aisha to slow down, to laugh, to draw superheroes with him when the world felt too heavy. Months later, at a school talent show, Jamal stood on stage, his voice steady as he presented a comic he'd drawn, a story about a sister and brother who fought villains together, not with anger, but with heart. The crowd cheered, and Aisha, sitting in the front row, clapped until her hands hurt. She realized then that the fight in the alley hadn't just been about protecting Jamal. It had been about showing him he was worth protecting, worth believing in. And in doing so, she'd found her own strength, too. The story of Aisha and Jamal isn't just about a fight won or bullies defeated. It's about the battles we face every day, fear, doubt, the weight of others' expectations, and the courage it takes to keep standing. It's about family, about love that fights through pain, and about finding power in protecting those who matter most. Aisha didn't just save Jamal that day. She showed him how to save himself. And in the end, that's the greatest victory of all.